Interview
with Bongani Bingwa.
18 after 7. So from next week, we are starting the G20 Correspondence Desk on 702, proudly brought to you by RMB and FNV, divisions of First Rand Bank Limited. And of course, as you are well aware, later this year, the who's who of global decision makers from business to politics are all going to converge on Johannesburg for a major conference and gathering that is being hosted for the first time in South Africa by South Africa. And I think it's a major boost not only for this country, but indeed for the continent. The B20, of course, is the official business gathering on the sidelines of the G20. Nana Phiri, who's the head of RMB's corporate client group, has come into the studio because she recently took part in the Africa CEO Forum and has been part of key G20, B20 discussions. And we thought, let's set the scene early so that we all have an understanding of what is to come. A pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome to 702 Breakfast.
Good morning, Bongani, and the listeners for 702.
Thank you for coming in as well in person, which is absolutely fantastic. By the way, you can check us out on our YouTube. We are live streaming this conversation. Let's start, I suppose, more broadly. I have said we're going to have the who's who of decision makers globally here in South Africa, barring one or two, but let's not go there. Why is this significant for us to host?
Firstly, it's the first time ever since the start of the G20 that an African country is hosting it. And that for it to be South Africa is quite incredible. Secondly, it brings together, G20 brings together 19 of the world's largest economies in one place to come and discuss the key topics from a policy perspective. And that includes the Eurozone as well as the African Union. And then thirdly, Africa at the moment is a very key interest, a key area of interest for global powers in terms of trade and investment, and for South Africa to be leading such a G20 summit is incredible right here.
We say 19, of course, because since the Russia-Ukraine matter, the Russians have been excluded. So we're hearing the themes are what? Solidarity, equality, and sustainability. For many people around the world, in fact, not just in this country, they would raise an eyebrow at those themes because it would appear, at least as ordinary folk, those are the very things that are not happening on a global level, right? In terms of solidarity, equality, and sustainability. How do we make sure that those are not just talking points, but that can translate into reality?
I think South Africa has been, even through our history, we've been at the forefront of solidarity, equality, and sustainability. And I think this is quite powerful in terms of what's happening. And from RMB perspective, in terms of our partnership with G20 as well as B20, we really want to make sure that we form part of the story around sustainability and solidarity. And I think just even speaking from a solidarity perspective, the fact that the African free continental trade is there, and South Africa is pushing it as part of the key things that we're discussing from a policy perspective of how we enable economies to actually trade together in South Africa is quite a powerful thing.
But what I'm saying is, for ordinary folk, we see how the world's larger economies are the ones who have created the mess that requires us to have a conversation about sustainability. Solidarity isn't something that feels like it is always there, particularly with nations that are lagging behind, both economically and in other ways. And really the idea of equality in such an unequal world, how do we make sure those themes are tangible for ordinary folk?
I think very important. And I think, for South Africa to be leading it, which is an African country already, just opens up the whole plethora of things for the men on the street. And for the emerging market to be actually put on a spotlight and say, we are pushing this in a global political tensions at the moment, for South Africa to take that with the grace that it has today has been quite an incredible story for them.
Because we're going to lead this conversation differently, aren't we?
Correct. With a positive solidarity of how, if we partner together, we are better together.
You were part of the CEO Forum. What are some of the takeouts that emerged out of that?
CEO Forum, I think the president also attended that to launch the presidency from a G20 perspective. Critical minerals was a key thing that was discussed there from a South Africa perspective around, our transitioning program in terms of the just energy transition was the key things that we were discussing. And I've already mentioned just trading between the African countries. As you can see with the global tension around trading across globally, and it's more imperative now that the African countries actually trade with each other.
You've mentioned the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Have we taken sufficient advantage of that, not only as South Africa, but indeed as the continent? I saw an interview with Jeffrey Sachs the other day, and who says the only thing holding Africa back at this point is unity.
I think we have not to date, but I think, with what's happening in the world, all the African Union, together with the statesmen from a African perspective, are putting it top priority. And for me, I always say, it sometimes takes a crisis to drive the right direction. And I'm very excited to see that, this is driving, solidarity within the African continent, where we can actually trade with each other going forward.
So what policy reforms do we need to make that something that works for the continent finally, and not just a signed agreement from 6, 7 years ago?
I think borders, in terms of trading borders, cross-border payments, I think is one of the critical things from a digital transformation and innovation perspective that both the G20 and the B20 are talking about. How do we facilitate paying each other, whether in local currency, which is a key thing across the continent with multiple currencies. So just policies around that, how we trade together, and two, how we pay each other within those can really be an unlock.
You are coming in, of course, as a bank in this space.
Correct.
What role do private-public partnerships play in shaping these conversations?
I think, our involvement in the task forces from a B20 perspective, they've got 8 task forces, including employment, digital transformation, infrastructure, trade and investment, of which, our group CEO is the chairperson of. And just, directing policy into those key areas can really be transformative. But I think, roles such as the bank as ourselves, we live solidarity, we live sustainability. I can give you an example of one transaction that we really proud of, which is the transaction where we partnered with one of our clients called Liquid Telecom in the Eastern Cape, providing fiber network to the Eastern Cape communities in order to ensure hospitals and just the communities around there have access to internet and information as part of the digital transformation for inclusion.
Because connectivity is important.
Correct.
Talk to me then about trade and investment. Your group CEO is chairing that task team. What are some of the opportunities around that?
So I think we've already spoken around the free trade. It's also just around, with the geopolitical tensions around how do we make sure that we set up, the African continent to benefit from the various opportunities, both in the north as well as in the global south, to entrench those relationships, to make sure that we're able to direct foreign direct investments into the African continent and particularly South Africa as well.
Because financial institutions have a key role to play
100%.
in this. You've got to back these projects. You've got to back unknowns.
Correct.
Take a chance. Take a chance on Africa. Take a chance on South Africa.
Correct. Absolutely. And also just connecting the corridors, which is something that we do very well. Connecting multinationals who are looking to invest in the continent, in South Africa, and bringing foreign direct investments into South Africa is one of the key things that we are exceptional on from our perspective.
Listen, it's going to be one of those to remember, I think. We've had 1 or 2 moments like this, I think, in the last 30 years. I think when we first hosted, for example, the Global AIDS Conference, I think it was Durban, under the Mbeki presidency. We've had world leaders come to South Africa before for gatherings of this sort. This promises to be one of the most significant, and you will be there playing a role as RMB, and I appreciate you coming in to explain what that might look like. Nana Phiri is the head of Corporate Client Group at Rand Merchant Bank. Now, hosted in Africa for the first time, this year's G20 summit focuses on solidarity, equality, and sustainability, bringing you news and insights from the summit. So tune in, as I said earlier, into the G20 Correspondence Desk, brought to you by RMB and FNB, proud sponsors of this year's G20 summit. So that'll start next week. Every Friday you'll hear it on this show. And it's guided by the spirit of Ubuntu, RMB, and FNB to empower communities. RMB and FNB are divisions of First Rand Bank Limited, an authorized financial services and credit provider.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.